Hello and welcome to this Cadlam Cymru revision session. This video will focus on GCSE Geography and will revise the weather topic. First of all, we will go through the factors that can affect weather here in the UK, focusing on temperature and rainfall in particular. And as you look at the images on this slide, you might be able to think of some of the factors that can have an impact on our weather in the UK and in Wales. Firstly, we have latitude. Latitude is shown by the lines on the map on the right-hand side of the screen that go around the Earth horizontally. These are crucial as they can affect and influence the temperatures. Why is that? Well, it's because of the distance from the equinox. 0 degrees around the Earth. We have damp, wet weather, and that's where we would see the rainforests. In the UK, our latitude lines range from about 50 degrees in the north to about 59 degrees to the south. Clearly, the distance from the equinox gets larger towards the poles, and that is clearly going to affect how many sun rays we get and influence the temperatures that we get. As we can see in the image on the left-hand side of the screen, UK temperatures in the summer are perhaps around 16 to 17 degrees in the south, but towards the north and up to the north of Scotland, it's about 13 degrees Celsius. So we can see immediately from the image that latitude has an effect on our temperature. Why? Because of the distance from the equinox, and we get fewer sun rays as we move towards the poles. Next, we need to look at altitude and aspect, both of which have an impact on our temperatures here in the UK. Why is that? Well, if there is altitude, as there is in Wales and in the north of Scotland, temperature falls by about 1 degree Celsius per 100 metres. In the diagram on the left, we can see Ben Nevis in Scotland, and as it says in the top left corner of the diagram, temperature decreases with height, and as we get to the top of the mountain, it is minus 3.5 degrees Celsius compared with 10 degrees Celsius at sea level. Another factor that influences our temperature is a southerly aspect. A southerly aspect gets more sunlight and a higher temperature. The sun faces the south during the day, therefore the southerly aspect of a mountain or piece of land is going to get more sunlight, and the temperature is going to be considerably higher than areas that have a northerly aspect. So here is a typical exam question where you have to apply the knowledge that you have about temperature and the factors that influence temperature to the question on the paper. So the question asks you to name another element of the weather apart from temperature. Question 1 there. So this video isn't going through the different weather elements, but as it says in the question, temperature is one element of the weather, name another. Well, you could include rainfall here. That is another element that you could name. Wind is another element of the weather, the direction of the wind and so on. Just a few to consider. Question 2 is a general question. There are other videos on the Cadlam Cymru website that look at describing location, but the criteria for this type of question is fairly simple. If you see a map on the exam paper that you haven't seen before, do take a good look at the map in front of you and refer to any keys that are provided with the map. Remember the compass points as well. To describe the location of Faversham, we can see that it is in the southeast of the UK. You would probably get 1 mark for saying that, but to get the full 2 marks, you need to say a bit more. You could say that it is in the southeastern corner of the UK, down from London to the southeast. You could also make use of the scale given below the map and use your ruler to work out the distance between London and Faversham, for example. So Faversham is in the southeast of the UK, to the southeast of London. It is so many kilometres below or from London. One other thing you could include in your answer is the type of land in Faversham. Note that the key given for highland is blue and for lowland green. You could therefore note that Faversham is located in a lowland area of the UK. Then question 3 on this paper is asking you to apply your knowledge of temperature. The question asks you to explain why the temperature is lowest in Braemar and to use the map to help you. Well, the first thing to note is that Braemar is located in the north of the UK in Scotland, and we can see from the key that it is located in Highland. As we know, with every 100 metres of altitude, the temperature decreases by 1 degree Celsius. That would probably earn you 1 or 2 marks. To get the full 3 marks, you would need to say a bit more than that. You could point out northerly Braemar. We know about latitude, that is distance from the equinox, and we can see that Braemar is nearer the North Pole at a higher latitude, which means that the temperature is lower than down in the south of the UK. Again, we have used the evidence provided in the map and applied the knowledge that we have about factors that influence temperature to answer the question. So another factor that has an impact on temperature is ocean currents. You can see one of these ocean currents that affect the weather in the UK on the map here, the red arrow. So what are these currents? Well, ocean currents can transfer heat from warm latitudes to cold latitudes. You can see the North Atlantic drift marked on the map on the red arrow. Very warm air from the Gulf of Mexico is transferred by the jet stream up to us in the UK. What does it bring? Well, it brings heat and humidity into higher air, and it's warm and wet. The sea plays an important role here of maintaining heat in the winter, and that means that it also cools down more slowly in the winter. So the UK has a way of maintaining heat during the winter much more effectively than some other countries in continental Europe. Another important element is prevailing winds. As you will likely remember from studying longshore drifts, for example, we get our prevailing winds from the southwest in the UK. So the temperatures in western coastal areas are higher in winter and maintain heat during the summer, which means that the temperature can be higher than in parts of continental Europe. We also need to understand the effects of weather, rainfall, for example, when looking at the factor of altitude. We already know that temperature decreases with altitude and it gets colder, but we also need to look at rainfall. One process that happens with rainfall is relief rain. As you will see on the screen here, the diagram has been labelled. Firstly, we can see that warm air from the sea is carried by the southwesterly prevailing winds. The air is then forced to rise over the mountains, and as the air rises, it cools and condenses. We know this because the temperature decreases and it becomes colder. This causes clouds to form, and when there is cloud, there is heavy rainfall on the mountains. On the eastern side, there is sinking air. The air gets warmer and drier. Evaporation takes place, and we see drier conditions. This is called rain shadow, which means an area of reduced rainfall on the side facing away from prevailing winds. So it is a sheltered area. So we see different weather patterns between different areas of the UK, with the western areas, such as West Wales, getting different weather from eastern regions, such as the Midlands or the eastern coast of the UK. Why is this? It's because of the jet stream and the prevailing winds. So here's another exam question. The question asks you to annotate the cross-section below to explain why the total rainfall changes along the AB cross-section line in the UK. So they are expecting you here to refer to relief rain. It's also important to note that even though it says annotate, they are asking you to explain why the rainfall changes. So thinking back to the previous slide, take a few seconds to think about what type of air comes from the sea. I'll give you a few seconds now, but remember that you can also pause the video and take as much time as you want. Okay, let's have a look at what you could write here. Well, it is warm and moist air that comes from the sea. Air rises and condenses. This forms clouds. The air sinks and becomes warmer and drier. Dry conditions and rain shadow. So there you've described exactly how relief rainfall is formed. It might also be an idea for you to add relief rainfall process as a title to the diagram. So here's another question that is actually taken from one of the EduCAS past papers. EduCAS is the English side of WJC where they create exam papers for schools in England. But you can easily go on the EduCAS website to have a look at their past papers in addition to looking at the WJC ones just for some additional practice. This particular question hasn't come up in the WJC exams yet. Now this question provides a statement. Climate varies in different parts of the UK. Explain why. At first glance, this might seem to be a difficult question. However, have a think about the factors that have an impact on our climate and on the weather here in the UK. You will have discussed these things with your geography teacher. This video has already covered some of these things, so you might want to attempt this question in a moment. Note that this is a 6-mark question. With 6-mark questions, especially with ones that ask you to explain why, you do need to use conjunctions or compound words to develop your points. This should not be a list of bullet points. So to help you, I've made a list of things that we've already looked at in this video. My list is in bullet form just to provide some suggestions and get you thinking. But do remember that you will need to write in sentences. I'll give you a moment now, a few seconds, just to have a little think about which points you need to mention and guess what my suggestions are going to be on the next slide. So take as much time as you want. Do pause the video if you need to. So what do we have here? Okay, well, one of the things we've already discussed is latitudes and distance from the equinox and how that has an impact on temperature. Then there's aspect. We've talked about how southerly aspects have higher temperatures. You will want to note altitude here and how temperature decreases by about 1 degree Celsius per 100 meters. And you can also talk about how altitude affects rainfall, that relief rainfall happens. And you could elaborate more on that and explain why that happens. You should note prevailing winds and ocean currents and how the west side of the UK can be warmer compared to the east, which is drier. Then distance from the sea. This clearly has an impact, as we have discussed. Why? Well, that's because of the ocean currents. Something else you could mention, which I haven't mentioned so far in this video, is the effects of urban climates, where urban areas can have higher temperatures, and we call these microclimates. Why is that? Well, because of black surfaces on streets, buildings, infrastructure, and so on. The next thing to look at is air masses, which we have in the UK that also have an impact on our weather. There are these different air masses that you can see on the map here. I will start by discussing the tropical maritime air mass. I've already mentioned this by pointing out that this is more likely in the UK because of our prevailing winds, mainly those that come from the southwest. With these air masses, we are likely to see moist winds. Why are they moist? Well, because they come from the currents of the northern drift of the Atlantic from areas such as the Gulf of Mexico, where temperatures are higher and the ocean is warmer. So we see light, damp winds in the winter and rainfall coming because of that. Then there's the tropical continental air mass. You may remember from weather forecasts in the summer that we sometimes have dust coming over from the Sahara. What causes that? Well, that is caused by the air masses that come up from the south. The tropical continental air masses bring dry, hot winds. Then there are the polar continental air masses, which bring cold air from areas such as Russia, and with these air masses we usually see cold winds and fog. Lastly, there's the polar maritime air mass. Again, these air masses bring cold winds. It's important that you understand the difference between each type of air mass and how they impact on our weather in the UK. Here's a 6-mark question. Explain why. The command word here, explain. Explain why different air masses bring weather variations to the UK. Use information from this resource and what you know to support your answer. You must add to the map below to support your answer. So here you will need to use the information we've already discussed. To get the 6 marks, you will need to mention that oceanic polar air mass brings specific weather conditions, that tropical oceanic air mass brings certain weather conditions. You can mention the prevailing winds and the influence of oceanic currents here. In the other 2 boxes, you can mention the other 2 air masses noted on the previous slide, polar continental and polar maritime, and explain what type of weather comes with those 2 air masses. I suggest you now pause the video and have a go at this question. Next, we're going to discuss 2 weather patterns that we get in the UK, which are low pressure or depression and high pressure or anticyclones. This map here might be one that you haven't seen before. Put simply, this is a synoptic chart or synoptic map, and it shows isobars here on the right, mainly signifying the wind. So what we see here is depression, so low pressure. In simple terms, the air rises during a period of depression and we get a cloudy sky, rain, either heavy or light, and the isobars on a synoptic chart are very close together and below 980 millibars. This leads to unsettled conditions and the depression comes from the west with our prevailing winds. During a depression, we also see a cold front, a warm sector and a warm front. And you might be asked a question about this. Basically, the prevailing winds transport air to the UK from the Gulf region, which creates a cold front where the air begins to rise. And then there's the warm sector, and we might also get rain in the warm sector. What happens is that 2 air masses meet and are unable to mix, so the polar maritime air mass and the tropical maritime air mass are unable to mix, meaning that we have 2 different fronts. Between those 2 fronts, where the air is attempting to rise, we have unsettled conditions, the warm, moist air rising and forming clouds and causing rainfall. So in the warm sector, we have warm, continuous rain. In the distance, we may see fine conditions, with the worst weather conditions possibly in the west. In contrast, we have anticyclones or high pressure that create very different conditions from depression. With anticyclones, the air sinks There are very few clouds, the conditions are dry and sunny, and it's likely to be cool at night with mist, possibly. Why? Well, because there are no clouds, it means that the air is able to escape easily. In the summer, we have high temperatures, and in the winter, the temperatures are low with the formation of ice. And temperatures also decrease at night because of the lack of cloud. A synoptic chart for anticyclones would show the isobars fairly spread out, and they are likely to be higher than 1020 millibars. If there is any wind at all, it will be light wind. There is a question here that asks you to explain the difference between a high and low pressure system in the UK, and it's worth 4 marks. Explain is the command word, and the other keyword is difference. So what you need to do here is to contrast the weather conditions that we get in a high pressure system with those that we get in a low pressure system. Here are some suggestions that I've jotted down, but you might want to pause here and have a go yourself before I bring up my suggestions. Okay, so the air pressure is low during a depression, below 990 millibars, and the air pressure during an anticyclone is higher, above 1020 millibars. So that's the first point there. During a depression, the air rises, whereas during an anticyclone, the air sinks. During a depression, we get strong winds, while during an anticyclone, the wind is weak, light, or even non-existent. Lastly, you could mention the weather patterns that we're likely to see. So during a depression, we will get mild, cloudy, damp weather, possibly with periods of heavy rain, whereas during an anticyclone, we're likely to see cold, dry weather in winter, clear skies during the day, which can lead to the formation of frost during the night, caused by sinking temperatures due to the lack of cloud. In summer, we're likely to have dry, hot weather and possibly heat waves. So that's the end of this video that revises weather. We have focused on high and low pressure and looked at factors that affect rainfall and temperatures in the UK. You will find other GCSE Geography videos on the Carlam Cymru website at the address on the slide here. And if you're continuing to study geography at A-level, check out the revision videos for AS and A2 as well. We have a wealth of revision videos in other subjects as well, so do take a look and dip into the videos that you think might be useful for your exam preparation. So the only other thing to say is good luck.